And now we've arrived at the turning point, or at least one of the turning points, in the story of the Acts of the Apostles. Saul, on his way to Damascus to continue doing what he had been doing in Jerusalem, meets Jesus at a literal come to Jesus moment. You know, usually when we say that phrase, it's because you had to tell the person something terrible, right? And Paul meets Jesus along the way. Saul meets Jesus along the way. And Jesus says to him a strange thing. Why are you persecuting me? Not why are you persecuting my church, not why are you persecuting my followers, not why are you persecuting these righteous people that are doing the thing that I have instructed them to do. Why are you persecuting me? Now for us, that should be encouraging because it means that Jesus identifies himself with his church, which is unsurprising considering that the most important analogy for the relationship between Christ and his church is that of bridegroom and bride. So as you might hope, the bridegroom feels persecuted when his bride is being persecuted. And then Saul is struck down. He falls from his horse, he gets back up, and he realizes he can't see anything. And so his traveling companions bring him the rest of the way to Damascus. And I guess they brought him to whatever house they were already going to. And he stays there in prayer and fasting for 3 days. And then the Lord calls one of the brothers in Damascus, Ananias, go to Straight Street, find Saul of Tarsus, and give him back his sight. And here's where I think it's important. I find there's a lot of parallels with the story of the prophet Jonah. Except the one who's going in the wrong direction is Saul. And the one who spends 3 days resting in agony and torment and analogous death is Saul. And then God comes to Ananias and says, hey, go heal Saul. And Ananias is like, wait, the guy who's killing all of your followers, he's blind? Good. Why would you do anything? It seems wonderful, right? Almost in the same way that Jonah arrives at Nineveh and God says to Jonah, go tell them 3 days more and Nineveh will be destroyed. Jonah looks up at God and goes, I don't see the problem here. Just let it happen, right? But Ananias, far better than Jonah. Because if you notice, Ananias is the one that needed to be struck down. Ananias wasn't the one going in the wrong direction. Ananias wasn't the one that had to spend 3 days in a proverbial death. It was Saul. And Ananias finds Saul and says, in the name of Jesus Christ, be healed. And he's healed. The scales fall from his eyes. And it's also funny that this is the language some people will use when they describe what their experience of conversion is like. I was struck down, and then as I'm adding a little bit here, but as I processed, as I chewed on the new thing I learned, the new experience that I had, this thing that rocked my world, it was like scales fell from my eyes. And I saw something new. And immediately from that moment on, Saul begins to preach Jesus Christ. Saul becomes Paul in that moment. And you got to imagine, what a weird experience to be the guy in the synagogue. Like, hey, isn't this the dude that was supposed to be coming here to arrest the followers of Jesus? Now he's proclaiming that Jesus is the Messiah. You can also imagine that, again, much like Ananias, the Christians that were already gathered in the synagogue there, looking at Paul going, it's not possible. I met some young people this way who came through confirmation, and I'm like going, you are a pain. And then 2 years later, they're like a step below manager at their job, and I'm like going, you? Good for you. I'm glad that worked out for you, because I honestly did not expect life to work out for you. And yet Saul becomes Paul, and it's sort of the beginning of the end, right? Everything goes on the rails at that point, and Saul begins this unbelievable journey that's going to be recorded throughout the rest of Acts, and he just never goes back.